Hello, everyone. Hope this finds everyone in fine shape, doing well, fat and happy, all that good stuff. Uh, Today, we're going to talk a little bit more about substance use disorder and transmissible diseases. And I'm going to talk about some of the diseases, both transmissible and non transmissible, that substance abusers are subject to. And I'm going to talk about disease in general as kind of the way human beings and our history, our fate, our society have all been shaped by illness, and our relationship with viruses and bacteria in the world whom we have to share our reality with. That's the one thing that I kind of do agree with the president on, is that we are going to share this world with viruses, and we'll find a way to do that, and we'll also die in the process. A lot of us with doing that. But without further ado, I'm going to go over here and share my screen with you, and we'll get started, and we'll reach back in time a little bit to do this. Substance use and transmissible diseases. Some issues and maybe some answers. We'll see. Let me go ahead and do a slideshow so that you won't be bothered by all that writing. The first thing one's tempted to think, at this point when you start talking about people who use drugs and transmittable diseases, is that we're going to be talking a lot about sexually transmitted infections, STIs. Used to be called STDs, but you know how people are playing with languages, playing with language and nomenclature and that sort of thing. We will be talking about those, but they're not the only transmissible diseases that we'll be concerned with. So that consider, for instance, here that many people with SUD are incarcerated or may be incarcerated. People who are dual diagnosed are also incarcerated. So it puts the people who have dual diagnosis with SUD and mental emotional disorders at extremely high risk, since in Texas anyway, we deal with our mentally ill people by putting them in jail. But we also have people in halfway houses and treatment centers and things like that, where sometimes illnesses break out, and it's unbelievable how things spread in some of these places. Long time ago, when I was working for Project Construction Company up in Wyoming, we had, it wasn't really a flu, but it was a lung infection that the workers there affectionately referred to as the lung clap. And man, it ran through our barracks like nobody's business. I got sick with it. I missed a little over a week's worth of work. Pretty nasty stuff. So if you're, soldiers, this happens to them, and, they share barracks and things like that. Sailors on ships, a bug will get on a ship and run through everyone. Anywhere you're in a confined space, this type of thing can happen. We've had for years institutional outbreaks of things like tuberculosis and various strains of flu, and now COVID-19 also poses a risk. And it has, by the way, really caused some problems in the treatment field. We've had a lot of treatment centers that have closed because of this. They're just not doing business. They've gone out of business. We'll be reorganizing after after this crisis passes for a while. There also, I said, anywhere you have dual diagnosis with emotional disorders, you'll see this type of thing occurring. Substance use disordered individuals are high risk for all sorts of illnesses, though, not just the ones that are transmissible. For instance, a high occurrence of co-occurring mental emotional disorders with a substance using population, including polydrug use and related illnesses such as cigarette use and COPD or lung cancer. People who are bipolar are, real prone to be dually addicted, to be using alcohol or some other drug and smoking cigarettes. And we talked about this in another class about that dopamine cascade, where you're getting your dopamine fix from smoking. So bipolar people are, they have a real problem with this, and that's not just them. I don't want to pick them out like I'm, blaming them or something. I'm not. I'm just saying that, their illness is such that they get relief from this kind of behavior, and this kind of behavior causes secondary illness in them. Drug users also have compromised immune systems, and if you're a smoker or a drinker and you catch something, you're going to be sick with it longer than people who are not smokers and are not drinkers, because you don't recover as well, because your immune system is compromised through your drug use. It takes us longer to heal from damn near anything. And when you're doing evaluations with drug users, and you're doing your first screening, your first interviews with them, you'll notice, because that's part of your job, to see what kind of physical shape they're in. I mean, you're not going to strip them down and give them a once over, but you may notice that they have cuts, scrapes, bruises that are old, that you can tell by looking at the skin that they've been there for a while, and they're not healing well. This is an issue with diabetics, who are using substances, whether it be alcohol or tobacco or whatever, is they're using these substances, and they're already healing slow because they're diabetics. And a wound is forever. It just doesn't get well. It lingers. So these are things to consider too. And we also have humankind, and I'm not just talking about substance users now, but just people. We've had serious illness with us forever. There was a time in my life when I was a little kid, if I walked into the house and Mom says, "What's wrong?" And I say, "I'm tired, I have a headache, I think I want to lay down." Next thing you know, she's hustling me to the doctor because she's absolutely sure I've got poliomyelitis. And when I was a little kid, Dr. Jonas Salk invented his oral vaccine for poliomyelitis, which eased the minds of millions and millions of mothers all around the world. Polio is a devastating illness. It cripples people. They have to wear braces on their legs. It cripples their arms. It cripples their ability to breathe. A lot of people wear iron lungs, a machine that breathes for you, and you have to lie in there encased in this tube that helps your lungs work. It's a hyperbaric thing, actually. And man, I'm happy to say that I haven't seen anyone in an iron lung in decades. And I hope never to see anyone in an iron lung again. It's very ugly. If you're curious, you can go down to the medical museum at Herman Hospital downtown, and they have a child's iron lung in there. And I can't even look at it without getting choked up. It's pretty powerful stuff. So Jonas Salk came out with his vaccine, and it basically wiped out polio. And we don't have to worry about that much anymore as long as we take our polio vaccine. If the illness pops back up again, maybe trouble. Now, this is not something that our human being passes to another through contact. This is something that you're going to get if a mosquito bites you, like malaria, like West Nile, like Zika. A lot of stuff comes to us from being bitten by insects. Other things, we have viruses. You out in a park and a kitty cat comes up and you're playing with the kitty cat and he scratches you and wanders off, and you don't think anything more about it until 4 weeks or so later when you start getting these symptoms. And by the time you get the symptoms, it's too late to do anything about it because you've had the rabies virus transferred to you. And when the symptoms start showing up, you're pretty much dead. We come in contact with things in our environment. And if we're not self-conscious about taking care of ourselves, it can have, some devastating illnesses. If you like horror movies like I do, with vampires and zombies and all the werewolves and all that kind of good stuff, the horror of all of those are transformation, and the transformation is usually coming through a bite or a scratch or something along those lines, or a virus. In 1665, fire and plague to London came. Daniel Defoe, that hairy gentleman right there on the right, also the writer of Robinson Crusoe, one of the coolest adventure books ever, wrote a journal of the plague year and what it was like in London to live through that event and what he saw, and he chronicled this contagion as it played out in the streets of London, England. And there's I reread this back in I think it was March of this year. It was around the time the coronavirus was breaking out. We were social distancing for the first time, etc. But there were a lot of similarities between the London of 1665 and the United States of 2020. One of the things that is not consistent with the Great Plagues of London, they had one of England. They had one in the 1300s that wiped out like a third of the population of Europe. But it was pretty ugly in 1665 too. Massive deaths and mass graves. They buried people all over London in huge pits, and anywhere you go in modern London, you might be walking over graves of people who died with the Black Death. The Black Death is bubonic plague, and And those wounds that you see there are lesions. Generally, they're around the neck, the groin, the armpits, those areas where you have swollen lymph nodes or buboes and they swell and they burst. And these roseate eruptions all over their bodies are the mark of the plague. At the time of the Black Death, it always came from somewhere else. Never was it something that sprang up among us because of us. And this is another one of the similarities. If you listen to our politicians speaking today, some of them will say that COVID-19 is the Wuhan virus or it's the China virus. And that's where it popped up. So, they're right about that. But the making it of foreign origin makes us feel better about it than if it sprang up here. And we can even view it as an attack, really. If you look, there it is, my cursor, right there. You can see that the priest, and I think this was representing a place in Poland rather than London, but a priest is there with, you can see he's got one on his hand. So the caretakers for the sick people often got sick and died as well. People were quarantined forcibly in most cases, and they would, if plague broke out in your house today, and we were operating like London in 1665, you would be required to stay in your house. You could buy food. People will come and bring you food and, make sure that your needs are taken care of in that regard. But there was no medicine, really. There were lots of doctors who were selling all kinds of quack things on the streets and promising you all kinds of stuff and telling you things that if you took this and did that, you'd be immune from it, but no one ever was. If you tried to leave your home, these guards would shoot you if they could, And I mean, of course, there were people who escaped and got away, but there were also people who were shot to death trying to break their quarantine. And your household would be closed up with you. And often no one survived to come out of the house. And they had people who would collect the bodies. And then they'd let them come back out, put them in the carts, take them and bury them in mass graves, and then go home to mama. So the people who collected and buried the dead were every bit as much at risk as everyone else. If you're, I think I have a slide here. Yeah, that gentleman right here is a plague doctor, and that was the uniform of the day. And he had this long mask, it looks like a bird's beak. And inside that mask, he stuffed flowers and aromatics and things like that, because it was believed at the time that the smell of the dead caused the sickness. In Bellevue Hospital, in Bethlehem Hospital in London, one of the physicians there noticed that these people here didn't have any lice. And Londoners were a filthy people in 1665. And it was a common belief that baths would make you sick, so you avoided taking baths as much as you could. So people had a healthy covering of body lice, and lice evolved with human beings. You know that, right? That they would that get in our hair and on our bodies and gravitate towards certain parts of our bodies. That's evolution at its finest, right? So we have these lice, and one of the physicians noted that these poor unfortunates here didn't have any lice. So one treatment for the bubonic plague, for the Black Death, was to sprinkle lice on patients and see if that wouldn't make them better, because all us healthy people were nasty as hell and had lots of lice on us, right? But the sick ones didn't. Can you hypothesize as why the sick people didn't have lice on them? I knew you could. You're absolutely right. It's because they had high temperature. Their temperatures were spiking up at 104, 105, 106. And they were burning up and sweating, and lice don't like that. And so they bugged out from more temperate climes of, say, 98.6. And so when they sprinkled the lice on them, the lice immediately ran away and found someone healthier to be on. Trying to treat this condition by introducing insects to it, introducing these little pestilent critters that has bothered humans since the caveman days, is kind of ironic, considering it's a flea that lives on a rat that bites human beings and causes this condition. So the flowers and the masks and the boutonnieres on the outside of the men's coats that they could put up to their noses, things like that, none of that helped. Some folks carried flowers around in their pockets or cut up flower petals, and they would stick the aromatics in the flower petals, actually pack their noses with them. I bet some folks got some serious sinus conditions out of that too. But in order to ward off the Black Death, it didn't work. And now, almost 400 years after the Black Death visited London, little kids are still singing, a ring of rosies, pocket full of posies, a titchu, all fall down. Or they may sing, ashes to ashes, we all fall down. This is the original verses over here. But the ring of rosies were those buboes we talked about that popped up around your neck and under your arms and around your groin. And pocket full of posies, the flowers that you carry with you to ward off the stench of the dead so that you won't get sick. A titchu. It's when people die of the Black Death, they usually die in a sneezing fit because they're full of congestion. And then we all fall down. Of course, we all fall down anyway, but we all fall down sooner if there's Black Plague going on in the neighborhood. And how bad does your luck have to be? Coming right off the tail end of that Black Death was the Great Fire of London, which was at the end of that plague year. And it was blamed on foreigners, the Dutch particularly, and was seen as religious terrorism. Sound familiar? Anyway, it's not funny, but I mean, human beings are funny. We're funny, and the things that we do and we say, and the things that we reach for in times of crisis. The fire could have had a good effect, though. It could have wiped out the plague rats that were left in old London. And it was medieval London that got clocked inside the Roman wall that they had built around it when it was still Londinium. But it killed a lot of rats, but it drove a lot more out into other areas of London. So it was a serious run of bad luck that the British were having at this time. And it wasn't as bad as the plague of the 1300s that killed off most of Europe, or a third of Europe, but it was still bad. And speaking of bad luck, the conquest of the New World. How did a relatively small number of Spaniards defeat the Mayans, the Incas, and bring down the Aztec Empire? I mean, look at this. They've got swords. They've got, flintlock rifles. That their weapons and armor weren't that superior. In fact, until the repeating rifle came along, Texas Comanches kicked the hell out of Mexican soldiers and American soldiers and drove them away from Comanche land in our state because they were better cavalrymen and they were murderous with their bows and arrows. They could fire the bow a lot faster than these guys could load those muzzle loaders, and they were more accurate with them too. So their weapons weren't that superior. So what happened? How did these relatively small number of Europeans come to America and take all this land and do genocide on the people who lived here, who outnumbered them a lot? Glad you asked. Guns, Germs, and Steel, which is a book. It's a fascinating book. I recommend it if you're interested in this sort of thing. The importance of lethal microbes in human history is well illustrated by Europeans' conquest and depopulation of the New World. And far more Native Americans died in bed from Eurasian germs than on the battlefield from European guns and swords. Those germs undermined Indian resistance by killing most Indians and their leaders and by sapping the survivors' morale. And this isn't Black Plague we're looking at. This is smallpox, one of the most devastating illnesses that the Europeans brought to the New World, along with syphilis, along with yellow fever, along with cholera, along with a whole bunch of diseases that the indigenous people had never encountered and had no resistance to, and it killed the hell out of them. And there were no illnesses here in the United States, here in the New World, here in Mexico, here in Canada, here anywhere in the New World that the Indians could give back to us. They didn't have anything to which we didn't adjust. And by we, I'm talking Westerners. But that's also pretty true for Africans too, who came here from Africa. They didn't get sick from Indian diseases, but they had Western diseases that they made the Indians sick with. Doesn't seem quite fair, does it? Viruses, bacteria, germs, they're not fair. They don't care. They don't care if you're black or white or yellow or red or any of that stuff. They don't care if you're religious or not religious. They don't care if you're a Republican or a Democrat. They've got other criteria that they need, and it's usually about the environment they survive in. So the diseases that Europeans brought with them is what really did a number on the indigenous people. Moving up into the 20th century, Alexander Skarsgård there, Tarzan, he's playing Randall Flagg in the new Stand series. Is coming out on TV. I think next month. Yeah, I think it is next month. Maybe this month. I don't know. But The Stand's coming out. It's based on a book, The Stand, which is a scary book. Stephen King's good with that. And The Stand involves a weaponized super flu that was being developed in a laboratory and got out. It's known colloquially in the novel as Captain Trips because it took off all over the world, and it devastates the world's population of humans. There are a relatively small number of people who are immune to this illness, and there are to any illness really that we have in the United States, or United States that we have in the world in our history. Every disease that we've ever encountered, it seems like some of us are immune to it. So Captain Trips involves the people who are immune to it, and Randall Flagg is one of those. But a particularly frightening aspect of the book is that in densely populated areas, in schools, and hospitals, and apartment buildings, and offices and high rises, and most frighteningly in jails. This is one of the scariest parts in that book, because there were people in the jail who died of the flu, of course, but there were also people in the jail who were immune to it, who starved to death because they couldn't get out, and they couldn't get water, and they couldn't get food. So it was pretty. No, it is really creepy. But anyway, Randall Flagg comes there and collects a minion to go off with him. But that was fiction. That was fiction. And that fictional story's been done a lot of times in things like zombie movies and things like that, where, and Edgar Allan Poe and Mask of the Red Death wrote about a disease that was rampant in the countryside, and everybody tries to get together and hide from it inside the walls of the castle. But of course, it gets in and devastates the place. That was fiction. In February 2020, an assisted living center in Kirkland, Washington, reported the first death from COVID-19. And also the first infection of a frontline healthcare worker, and also the first outbreak in a long-term care facility. And now 230,000 plus deaths later and counting, is on the increase again. We have not turned a corner. It is not in our rearview mirror. And that is not fiction. And that's the COVID-19 virus, little bleeder right there. Is it a new plague? Is it really the China virus? Is this something that is political in nature? Is it a terrorist attack? Is it, what is this thing? It has person-to-person transmission, and it's more deadly than the flu. Is it something that was done intentionally, or was it accidentally released and covered up? They're gonna make movies and stuff about this. We'll talk about that later. But right now, it is a serious concern. There are other illnesses. Remember those sexually transmitted infections I was going to tell you about? Oh, by the way, there is no cure for COVID-19. That right now what they do is manage symptoms and hope you get over it. And there is no vaccine for COVID-19. And there doesn't seem to be one coming up anytime soon. So, just saying. This is an excerpt from William Blake's London. But most through midnight streets I hear how the youthful harlot's curse blasts the newborn infant's tear and blights with plagues the marriage hearse. Now that doesn't sound like a very happy quatrain, does it? And indeed it's not. He's writing about London. I put the whole poem in your course room, by the way, so you can read it at your leisure. It's not a pretty picture of London, England, as William Blake knew it in 1793. But there's the youthful harlot. And there was a lot of prostitution in the world at that time. And for people who were born into the lower classes, she might be the breadwinner for her family. Here's a cop lurking underneath. I don't know what his role in this whole thing is. And the gentleman who's going upstairs. The youthful harlot's curse is a pox. It's syphilis. And when this guy goes upstairs with the youthful harlot, he's kind of, they had double standards back then too. Guys were expected to know something about something, to have been around a little bit. Women were not. It was scandalous if, female orgasm was considered a myth back then. People didn't believe it existed. But the youthful harlot's curse is bacterium. It's syphilis. And when she gives it to this guy, he'll probably within a short while he'll get a sore that appears somewhere on his body. It's generally genitalia where he'll find it. Sometimes on the end of his Johnson, sometimes in the scrotum, sometimes it's in his mouth, on his lip, something like that. And this is called a chancre. And the chancre sore doesn't hurt much, and it goes away relatively soon. And so it's easy to forget about it. It's just something that shows up and goes away. But it indicates that something's wrong with your body, and that something that's wrong with your body is a syphilis infection. And syphilis does terrible things to human beings who let it go unchecked. And so the line, how the youthful harlot's curse blasts the newborn infant's tear, and blights with plagues the marriage hearse. This guy is going to contract syphilis from going to the whore, and then he's going to go back to his wife, and he's going to give it to her, and when she's pregnant and births their child, the baby's going to have it too. The baby will likely be born blind. That's the reference of blasting the newborn infant's tear. And blights with plagues, the marriage hearse. So it's not, it's all about death, and left untreated, syphilis will kill you. There was a terrible study done in the United States in the 30s and 40s. They made a movie about it, by the way. It had Whoopi Goldberg in it, called Miss Evers' Boy. It's about the Tuskegee studies. And they had a lot of black men who were involved in these studies, and they were receiving treatment. I'm making little air quotation marks here, but you can't see them. But anyway, these poor guys were coming in and believing they were being treated for syphilis, but they were being given placebos. They thought that they were trying out new medications that'd be more effective at treating syphilis, but that wasn't what the study was about. The study was to see the natural progression and morbidity of untreated syphilis in black males. So the study was, how long is it going to take these men to die, and how are they going to die? And so it was a horrible, unethical, rotten piece of American history. And that came from the other pox, syphilis. And it's an other pox because it never comes from us. Syphilis is, and still today, considered in the United States of America. And I'm not trying to offend, I'm just telling you what is considered a black man's disease. It's not. a black man's disease. It's any man's disease, and any woman that he sleeps with's disease as well. And then it's any man that she sleeps with disease. So it passes very easily, male to female. It doesn't have a preference, male to male, female to female. It doesn't matter. But it makes us feel better somehow to say, this is from outside us. It's from over there. It's these other people who have this disease. It's the other illness. So in France, it was the German disease. You know, those nasty-ass Germans. That's what did this to us. In Germany, it was a Turkish disease. In England, it was the French pox. But it was always from somewhere else. Damn those Italians. And so on. STIs, sexually transmitted illnesses, and there are a bunch of them, and this is just a few. Syphilis is bacterial. It's treated and cured with antibiotics, but damage done by the illness may well be irreversible. A child born with congenital syphilis can be treated, and the bacteria that causes the disease will be eliminated, but that's not going to make him see. Someone who's eventually untreated syphilis leads to mental disorders, to insanity, if you will. Friedrich Nietzsche, the philosopher that we studied in the theories class, died of syphilis in an asylum. But so even though the illness can be cured with antibiotics, and it could be cured with sulfa drugs before antibiotics were invented. They had a short, successful run with dealing with some of these illnesses. The illness can be cured, but the damage from it may not be reversible. Does that ring a memory bell with you anywhere? Have you been paying attention to what's going on with COVID-19? People they get over their initial illness that causes them to be hospitalized, but they come out of it with damaged lungs, with heart problems, things like this, that in terms of what their future looks like is very iffy. They may get sick again. This illness may have cost them years of their life, in the long run. And as far as health care, the damage that was done to them may constitute now pre-existing conditions that the insurance companies won't cover. So there's a kind of a connection, if you will, there. Gonorrhea, also known as the clap, bacterial, treated and cured with antibiotics. When you get a gonorrheal infection, used to that they would the penis to help drain the pus out of it. It was pretty painful, from what I hear. Chlamydia, bacterial, treated and cured with antibiotics. HIV disease, human immunovirus disease, viral, treated with many things, but incurable as of yet. There's no way to say that once you have this that you're cured. Human immunovirus is a retrovirus. When it gets into the system, it destroys the immune system. And it comes in carrying genetic material inside it. It permanently installs itself in the body. Your immune system consists of a whole bunch of different types of cells, and the HIV, and that's human immunovirus. You shouldn't call it HIV virus. That's basically saying human immunovirus virus, and that's incorrect, right? It's like people putting making a plural out of weapons of mass destructions, causing them with putting that S on the end. It's WMD. If you put an S on the end, it's grammatically incorrect. Anyway, English lesson over. This virus attaches itself to the shell, to the outside of the T cell. T cell's a helper cell or a scout cell. It also acts as a killer cell, as a cytotoxin. But its primary job is to go out, locate the bad guys, forward scout, if you will, come back and say, come on, boys, bring back the red blood cells. But when it goes out on a scouting expedition and identifies the HIV, it gets attacked by the HIV. And as you can see, the HIV is much smaller than the T cell. HIV is not a big virus. And it attaches to the T cell, and then the protein shell breaks off and it invades the helper cell. Once it's inside the helper cell, it uses an enzyme called reverse transcriptase, which changes the DNA inside the cell to the RNA of the invader, of the human immunovirus. So it multiplies inside the cell and it kills the cell. And when the cells die and is compromised, all of the HIV spills back out into the system and goes looking for some other T cells to kill. So it replicates itself inside the body, and infections can be the progress of the disease and the way this happens and how people get sick with it is very variable. If you posted a movie for you to watch. It's called And the Band Played On. And this is in 1994, I think it was, 93, when this film came out. Got some really good players in it. It's a well-done film. You probably will enjoy it. But it's about the early days of the HIV epidemic in San Francisco. It was taken from a book by the same name, And the Band Played On, that was written by a reporter for the San Francisco Chronicle by the name of Randy Schultz. And Randy was, he's a gay man. He lived in San Francisco, and that was his job to report on this stuff. And he became sick with HIV disease. He got AIDS, and he died from AIDS around the time the film was released. So it's a very powerfully done film. And he's pretty meticulous in chronicling how the contagion went. And if you watch the film, pay attention to the little clock that Don Francis at one point calls the butcher's bill. But how many cases, how many deaths? This went on here, then this many cases and that many deaths, and that went on here. You can kind of mark COVID that way too. But HIV is a relatively weak virus. So was COVID-19. It's easy to kill outside the body. You just wash your hands, practice good hygiene, cover your face so you don't inhale it, don't rub your eyes or pick your nose, that kind of thing. It's easy to kill outside the body. Inside the body, not so much. HIV thus far is incurable, but is treatable. There are some medications now, and some of them are being advertised on TV. You've probably seen them, where they talk about reducing the viral load so much that you can actually be sexually active without transmitting the illness, which is a pretty good claim, but I would be reluctant to do that, or I would be very reluctant to have sex with someone that I knew was HIV positive just because they were taking this drug and couldn't transmit it to me. I would doubt that. Although as a heterosexual male, the likelihood of my catching it from a woman is very low anyway. If you know these things about HIV disease and other STDs, STIs, you'll know that the facts of HIV is not necessarily a fact for syphilis, and vice versa, so that there are different factors involved. But when you had a HIV positive diagnosis back in 1989, 1990, 1991, and around in that area, we'd already decided to call this disease AIDS, and that AIDS is an acronym for Acquired Immunodeficiency Syndrome. Prior to that, it was known as gay cancer or gay pneumonia or something, and it had the word gay in it, So it was kind of like COVID-19, right? AIDS affects homosexuals. COVID-19 affects old people and people who have underlying conditions. And that's sort of true. But it's absolutely wrong that, it affects only those people. So that there's the difference with that. More than 75 million people worldwide have been infected since the start of the epidemic, with the first recognized patient being a female who died at Rigshospitalet in Denmark in June of 1981. Around 500,000 to 970,000 people have died of AIDS worldwide last year. It hadn't gone away. That's 500,000 to 1 million people, roughly, who died of AIDS in the world last year. We may have turned a corner with AIDS and the way we treat it, but it's not in the rearview mirror not by a long shot. And we still don't have a cure, and we still don't have a vaccine, and this has been around with us for a long time. Actually, I kind of questioned that June of 1981 thing, because I think there was a person who died in 1978. And it's quite possible that people were identified. They didn't know that they had this particular illness, but went back to as far back as 1954. Don't hold me to that. But again, this is a disease that's... You may have seen a film that came out, some years back. It was called Outbreak. Had Dustin Hoffman in it. And it was about a little capuchin monkey who was infected with some kind of disease. And he bit someone, and they sneezed, and it got airborne and got someone else, and the monkey escaped. And next thing you know, there's a disease spreading all over the United States and killing people. And as luck would have it, Dustin Hoffman, the virologist who was trying to work with Jean Russo, his estranged ex-wife, who was also a virologist, to cure this illness, they happened to be in California, where that monkey happened to be, and the monkey hadn't died and was hanging out in rural California, just outside this little town where there was a lot of plague, and they found the monkey. What could how could someone not believe that a research scientist could go out and out in the boonies and track down the monkey and catch it and draw some blood from it, and in just 2 days, 3 days, something like that, they've got all of the serum that they need to turn this illness around. And dear hearts, that makes for a fairly good movie, but it's straight up bullshit. Just like it's straight up bullshit when you hear that that we're drawing blood from people who've had COVID, and we're going to have a vaccine right around the corner. A vaccine any minute now. That's wishful thinking, and that's not what's happening, and it's not what's going to happen. I don't mean to be a bummer or rain on anyone's parade, but right now, COVID-19 is a retrovirus, and it's very similar to HIV, and it's very similar to the viruses that gives you Ebola River fever, which you'll see a little bit about and the band played on. It opens with that particular illness with Don Francis and a buddy in the Congo Basin. These illnesses are not easy to deal with, and we can't cure the cold. And how long's it been around? And there's no vaccine for the cold. We have vaccines that we guess at for influenza, and we're getting pretty good with influenza. And if we can get that good with some of these other illnesses, then we're in tall cotton until something else comes along. And something else always comes along. Substance use individuals, to get away from just, generally speaking about illness and get back into more specifics with substance use disordered individuals. People who have substance use disorders who are in treatment or in early recovery particularly are very vulnerable to both viral and bacterial infections. And people who are currently using drugs or drinking, which is also using drugs, or smoking, which is also using drugs, or doing any of these things, are very vulnerable to both viral and bacterial infections. I had a client back some years ago who had a gonorrhea infection, and he couldn't stay sober long enough for his medications to cure his gonorrhea. I admitted him to a hospital. I referred him for admission to a hospital, and he was put in, there for detox. But I didn't sell him on the idea that you could go here and, get sober and everything be wonderful. I told him if you go here, they'll be able to get you over that gonorrhea infection, and they were. He was in there, and he didn't have anything to drink, so his medication worked very well and all that good stuff. And he got back out, and then he started drinking again, and then he caught gonorrhea again because he really liked this girl. But anyway, that's a whole nother ballgame. When we encounter the flu and we have a compromised immune system, we're probably going to catch it. And if we encounter the flu and we have a compromised immune system, it's going to hit us hard, and we're going to get sicker. And there are antiviral medications that we can take to alleviate the symptomologies, but it's not a cure for the flu. Your body basically has to repair itself to fight this thing off, and your immune system has to kill off the invader. And when the invader's no longer there, you no longer have an active case of the flu, and you're not contagious. You won't pass it on to other people. But while you got the flu, if you kiss someone, shake their hands, drink out of their glass, any of that stuff, breathe too closely in their face, you're running around a little typhoid Mary, and you're contagious to everyone. We have a season for the flu, and right now we're coming into that season. We're just hurricane season's ending, flu season's begun. And you better wash your hands a lot, because that's generally how you're going to get the flu. You're going to touch a doorknob, and then you're going to rub your nose. you're going to flush a toilet in a public bathroom that someone else flushed a few minutes before, and you're going to get the flu. That's how you're going to get colds too. Colds, by the way, are called colds because it looks like you're cold. You shiver and shake, and you cough, and your nose runs, and all that kind of good stuff. You don't get a cold from going out in a cold. You can go out with your hair wet. I know what your mother said. You can go out barefooted. I know what your mother said, but it won't make you sick. You won't have a cold. What gives you a cold is a virus. And when you get that virus, you're going to ride that cold till the virus is gone, till your body fights it off. Now, you can take aspirin, and you can take cough syrup, and, a bunch of things you can do to make yourself feel better, but that's not curing the cold. That's managing the symptoms, and that's what happens with flus and colds and coronaviruses for the most part. A big problem that has run through the substance use disorder community, particularly those who've been in lockup and sometimes those who have been in treatment centers, is tuberculosis, bacterial tuberculosis. And tuberculosis largely affects the lungs and the respiratory system, but you can also get it in your spine, and there can be other complications with this. Tuberculosis is nothing to sneeze at, and it's hard to get rid of. But there are drugs that you can take for bacterial tuberculosis. When you're taking these drugs and you're taking with the bacteria, for instance, the drugs that they're going to treat it with are largely going to be antibiotics, and we have some illnesses now that are antibiotic resistant. There are antibiotic resistant strains of tuberculosis, and of course we know about the antibiotic resistant staphylococcus that is also all over the hospitals everywhere in America. So bacterial illnesses that we can treat and we can manage for the most part, and we can cure to some degree. Then we have hepatitis. This is another thing that's very common for substance use disordered individuals. One of my brothers died of complications of hepatitis and liver failure, and that was due to hepatitis C. Hepatitis is viral, some hepatitises. Hep A, B, C, D, E are all viral hepatitises. A and B are pretty rapid onset, pretty painful. And so you have them relatively soon after you've been exposed to them. You can take, for hepatitis B, we have vaccines that will keep you from getting it if you happen to be exposed to it through blood or needle sticks or whatever. And some of the hepatitises can be sexually transmitted, but depends on what you're doing sexually. Like hepatitis A, if you're coming in contact with fecal matter, for instance, so if you're doing analingus or anal sex or something like that, you have a higher chance of getting infected with Hep A. Hep B you usually get from needle sticks. That's a real hazard in a hospital, or has been in the past. Used to, when you went to the doctor, they'd take and they're going to give you a shot. They'll uncap the needle, draw the medicine, give you the shot, then recap the needle. And recapping the needle is where the needle stick usually happens. So now, after a needle has been used, they'll take it right over to a Sharps disposal station and drop it in. And that's where you're supposed to put it anyway. When I was still officing over in the McNulty Haddock complex, we had a little incident that occurred over there some years back. when the trash can was really full, and one of the nursing students was packing the paper towels down in the trash can, and she comes out with a hypodermic hanging off the palm of her hand. And that freaked her out for a while, because that's a good way to get hepatitis, A, B, C, D, E. It's a good way to get all kinds of bloodborne pathogens, including HIV. So it was, she had all kinds of reasons for freaking out, but, all's well that ends well. It was a diabetic student who disposed of her sharp improperly. That was, there was no, big disease transmission, but there was a big old scare behind it, you can bet. Alcoholics can drink themselves into hepatitis. Too much alcohol damages the liver, and hepatitis is an inflammation of the liver, and it becomes inflamed, and you get jaundice, you turn yellow and stuff like that. And then there's autoimmune hepatitis, and this occurs with people who have autoimmune illness, and their immune system isn't functioning right. And one of the ways you know it's not functioning right is because it attacks your organ system. Anyway, we know exactly how human immunovirus is transmitted, and it's entirely preventable. You're not going to catch HIV off a toilet seat. You're not going to get it off a doorknob. You're not going to get it by picking up a glass and drinking after someone. You're not going to get it from shaking hands. You get it from engaging in sexual behavior, or by exposure to blood products in certain ways, like sharing needles, that kind of thing. How do you prevent it? Well, the best way to prevent it is to not have sex, period. The end, over. If you're not having sex with anyone, you're probably not, that's the best way to not get any sexually transmitted infection, is to not have sex. Or you can practice outer course, and generally speaking, you're not going to get a STD, STI from that. I'm having a hard time. I've said STD for so long, it's hard to say STI. Anyway, there's some condoms, there's some needles, and some paraphernalia for you. And at the bottom is non-oxynol 9 and other spermicides that ladies can use to make sure that they're taking care of themselves and not rely on gentlemen to take care of them. If you use a condom, it's a good idea to use a spermicide. And a lot of condoms nowadays are lubricated with spermicides. And what that means, a spermicide is a chemical that kills sperm. So that even though there's ejaculate involved, the sperm, the little swimmers that go up the up the uterine canal and run into Edna Egg and get her in a family way, they're taken care of before they get that far. So you can use condoms and spermicides. And if I'm talking to people about risk reduction, I'll talk to them about that's something that you can do. That's something that you can do to make yourself safe. And anytime you're talking about changing a behavior, and those, you'll hear more about this from Vanessa in prevention. But anytime you're working with people to change a behavior, you're engaging them on a number of levels. One is a knowledge level, and making sure that they know something about what's going on. But you have to address their knowledge or lack of knowledge. You also have to address their attitudes, because, wait a minute, what I don't have to do that, because, and they'll fill in a because. And beliefs. Attitudes and beliefs are are tough. I can fix knowledge a whole lot better than I can fix attitudes and beliefs. But all three of these things drive behavior. And if you can personalize risk factors to individuals, and they can actually see that what they're doing is very hazardous to themselves, and that they could do something different, then chances are pretty good they would, as long as it's not too much trouble. For instance, don't share needles. Great, I like that. Where do I go to get some needles? That's a good question. Where do you go to get some needles? Can you just go to the drugstore and buy them? Do you have to get them where? Do you go to a nursing school and steal them? No telling. Don't share needles. People who use drugs intravenously, given the opportunity to obtain and use clean needles, will obtain and use clean needles. And that will be helpful to limit new infections. But make no mistake that if you're tweaking and needing a hit, and the only needle there is the one that these other 7 people in the room have just used, the tweaker will use it too. If I'm really having that withdrawal going on, I need to shoot up, then I'll do that. I can also teach people how to sterilize their needles, how to use bleach to clean them out. Like I said, HIV outside the body is a relatively weeny virus. You can kill it with anything short of harsh language, but don't share needles, and sterilize your needles. And there are needle and syringe programs in some states, and then some states you can just walk into a drugstore and say, I need to buy some hypodermics, and no problem. Need to buy some condoms, no problem. One of the problems, particularly with younger people who are becoming sexually active, if you're 15, 16, 17 years old and you go in to buy condoms at CVS, the people will give you grief for it. Not so much anymore. And I shouldn't pick on CVS. Let me say the drugstore. I was doing a presentation in Austin, and I used to have this little black bag I carried around with me, and it had Mr. Johnson, who was my big old artificial penis, and had some needles in there, and some kits to show people how to clean a syringe and use bleach to clean the syringe and stuff, and some condoms. When I was getting ready to do the presentation, the night before, actually, I found out I didn't have many condoms in there. I had a couple of, because I gave them out. I gave them away a lot. So I bopped down to the drugstore and got about 6 boxes of condoms. When I came up to the counter, there was a young man and a young woman, both there. The young woman was working the cash register, and the guy looked at all those condoms and he said, busy week, huh? And I said, no, just a big date tonight. And the poor little girl was blushing to pieces. That was very mean of me. But anyway, I bought them and took them on and, did my demonstration. The use of condoms and spermicides are reduce, but doesn't necessarily eliminate. In fact, and you want to use latex and not lambskin, which are porous. You can't even keep people from getting pregnant with those kind of condoms. And you do have condom malfunctions. You may, be thinking everything's okay, and then post-coitally look down and see that only thing left there on you is the ring. which is problematic now because you've got to do an extraction mission. But the they're not none of these things are absolutely foolproof. Well, let me rephrase that. The needle and syringe programs are absolutely foolproof. You use a needle once and dispose of it, you're good. As long as you're drawing using your own works, using your own drugs, as long as you're not drawing it out of a communal spoon where other people have been sticking their needles and things like that. So as long as it's all yours, that's pretty much foolproof. You use it once, dispose of it. Everything else is pretty good, but not absolute. Then there's limiting partners. Y'all remember the Clairol commercial from many years back? It was great, stuck in my head. Where did you get your beautiful hair? Why, I got it from Clairol. And I told two friends, and they told two friends, and they told two friends. And then the next thing you know, they've got, the screen is filled with all of these people. And that's called an elliptical progression, this elliptical transmission. And if you have sex with 5 different people this month, that's kind of, I don't know if that's all that ambitious, but 5 different people, 5 different partners this month. And each of those 5 people have sex with 5 different people that same month. And each of those 5 different people have sex with the same people that month. Then, by the time that month's over with, you're virally linked to about half the world's population. And human beings are like that, kiddos. We are like that. So limiting partners is a good deal. But limiting partners is like, how many times do you have to lose at Russian roulette? I mean, if you're using a revolver that's got, room for 6 rounds, one of them's in there, chances are pretty good, that you'll draw on an empty chamber. But if you don't, and so in places like Houston, Miami, Los Angeles, New York, where there's a lot of sexually transmitted disease and stuff, including HIV and other things to catch, your chances that your luck will run out at some point are fairly good if you're engaging in really risky behaviors. So limiting partners is good. Well, wait a minute, Bushart, I'm not promiscuous. Well, I'm not either. You know how I know? Because promiscuous refers to someone who has more sex partners than I do. I'm normal, right? You too, right? So these are subjective terms. And when you're talking to people about change and engaging knowledge, beliefs, and attitudes, you're presenting them with matter-of-fact information. And you want to try to keep it as matter-of-fact as possible because you don't want to deviate off into, great moral discussions and things like that. Why do LCDCs need to know all this stuff anyway? Well, that's a good question. I'll try to answer it for you. Based on stuff that we've already talked about. Our clients are at high risk for illness of all sorts. And we are, we're working with the whole person. We're not working just with their illness. I mean, they're a lot more than a substance use disordered individual or a dual diagnosed individual or whatever label we've got to filter our experience with them. We can help them stay safe and reduce that risk by giving them some tools, giving them some information, letting them know, this is what you can do to not get sick. And I'll stop here and share with you. It was in the HIV was, AIDS was still gay cancer. AIDS was, a new term for me. And I went to a workshop with my colleagues and my boss, and they had a guy come in to from a group that called themselves Over the Hill, and it was a gay men's group, and they were talking about telling people how to wear condoms and how to use non-oxynol 9 and how to avoid high risk sexual practices and how to clean your needles. And I went up to my boss and I said, I don't know if I can do this. I don't have any problem with gay people. You'd be hard pressed to find someone who cares less about how people have sex than me. It's totally up to whomever. If you want to do it, I'm pretty cool with that. But cleaning those needles, that's like tacit approval. That's like telling my clients, man, I expect you to slip. And I don't think that's a good message to give them. And I don't know if I can, in good faith do that. But you know what? I've come around, and I have come around. Here's the deal, and this is, and I'll lay it out with you the same way. This is information. If you can use it and it's helpful to you, fine. If you have it and you don't need it, that's fine too. You can have it, maybe pass it on to someone else. That would be even better. But this is about helping you stay safe and reduce that risk. If you're going to get high, this is how you keep from getting sick when you do it. This is how you keep from making someone else sick when you do it. I feel the same way about the social distancing and the mask laws. I don't give one single second-hand damn about this whole "it's my right" crap. If wearing a mask might keep someone else safe, wear the damn mask and quit being a baby. There, the end. We do this to lessen the risk. That's all it's about, lessening the risk. Also, when we're working with our clients, we have access to this high-risk group. They come to us. They're in our groups. They're in our offices. They're right there across the desk. All we have to do is give them information. All we have to do is to help them make slight changes in their life. There's a thing called an AIDS scorecard. And I don't know what happened to mine. I've been looking for it, but basically, it's a plastic card that you can use a dry erase marker with, and it's got. I could probably make one with one of these PowerPoint slides. In fact, I know I could. But it goes from red at the top to green at the bottom if you're going this way. Right, red, orange, yellow, I don't know what that color would be, and then all the way down to green. And it's got things, behaviors, and up here like oral sex, engaging in oral sex or anal sex or coming in contact with semen or with breast milk or, with vaginal secretions or whatever. And I circle all these when I'm talking to someone. And then we'll assess their risk factor. And I'll tell them, look, whoa, that puts you up here in the red. And you can see people's eyes getting big because they haven't thought about it this way. That you're engaging in all this risky behavior. The personalize the risk with them, and if you personalize the risk, then chances are pretty good that they're can make some significant or make some helpful changes. there's also the reality that when people look at this and their eyes get big, it scares the hell out of them, and they said, "That's it, man. I'm off of women. Forget that, or men, or whatever. Whatever my preference is, I ain't doing it no more. I'm through. That's it. Gone, done, overdone with, gone." And that's impractical and improbable. You know that chances are pretty good that our clients are not going to be able to swear off sex. We can have abstinence with drug use, but that's a struggle. We can have people on diets where they abstain from eating certain types of foods, etc., and so forth, but that's also a struggle. We can, when people abstain from sex, that's a struggle, and they lose a lot. So it's not practical for me to say I'm never going to eat any food again because I got to. It's not practical for me to say I will never be sexually active again because that's a very, very strong biological drive. So we'll talk about doing the things that we can do. There's another problem with sometimes with talking about risk reduction with this particular population, and that's with pre-test and post-test counseling if people are going to get a screen. If I have been nailing everything that will hold still long enough and has a pulse, I'm in a very, very high risk group, and you pull out the little age scorecard and show me where I've been doing all of this stuff, and now I'm freaked out, because it's a wonder that there's not a little mushroom cloud coming out of me. I've just nuked myself virally. But then I go and get a screen and I don't have it. And I think to myself, well, that was much ado about nothing, wasn't it? I must be one of these, immune people that he was talking about, because if I did all that and didn't get it, then I'm not going to. I'll cut back. I'll quit having unprotected sex with 5 people a month and only do it with 4, so I'll reduce my risk. When you are providing information and you are talking about change, like I said, you got to address the knowledge, give them the knowledge, address the attitude, address the beliefs, and that way we can help them stay safer and reduce that risk somewhat. We have access to the people. Like I said, they come to us, and for the most part, we have credibility with this high-risk group. I mean, I think you'll find that when you're working with your clients and you've been working with them for days or weeks or whatever, they trust you. And they listen to you. Sometimes they don't appear to listen to you, but they do. If we've been working with them over a period of time, we already have established relationships with our clients, and this is a good thing for them. Staying current on trends and communicable disease, particularly STIs, and rolling them over into prevention training has been a required component for relicensure since the 90s for people who are working with, who are renewing their LCDC's license, people who are renewing their certified prevention specialist credential and stuff like that. And so it's kind of ongoing. That may be changing soon, and the reason it may be changing is that I think across the board, when we had some really, really, really dire predictions for what HIV was going to do to the world. Back in when I started at Lee in 1990, there was a hue and a cry about this stuff, and I'm thankful that it didn't get as bad as everyone thought it would. As worldwide, it didn't get as bad as it would, and in the United States, it didn't get as bad as it could have. Although in those days, and this is another one back in the days. it was a horror show. People who got sick and just wasted away right in front of you. Who had toxoplasmosis, a disease that cats get, who have 4 or 5 different types of cancers going on, who have venereal warts in their eyes, and just horrible, and a very rough way to go. And the cure, the treatment was almost as bad as the disease. You're taking, a wheelbarrow full of pills every week, and they, make you sick 9 kind of ways. You take, a green pill to counteract the secondary effect of the blue pill, which you took to counteract the effect of the red pill, which you took to drive down your viral load, etc., and so forth. It was pretty terrible. The treatment has gotten much more sophisticated, more focused, and more effective. We still need training in how to talk to our clients and how to present information to them, how to answer their questions honestly. We still have a lot of misinformation out there about HIV. I had a guy after a presentation one time tell me that he had been getting tested for HIV twice a year for about 4 years because he'd had a homosexual experience with a guy. And he didn't understand the contagion. He didn't understand how long it would take you to seroconvert if you were going to. And I'm going to try to put this delicately. My guy I was talking to, he was the pitcher. He was not the catcher in this particular engagement. In fact, it was a dude was performing fellatio. He was giving him a blowjob. There is a possibility of contagion that way, but it's very slim for the pitcher, for the guy who's on the receiving end of the blowjob. For the guy who's doing it, the risk is much higher because he's the catcher and he's the one where the ejaculate is going to be deposited. And that is a greater risk when that goes on. But if you do something like that and decide that you want to get an HIV screen, or if you stick yourself with a needle, perhaps that's a better example. If you stick yourself with a needle in a hospital, you're working as a nurse or nurse's aide or something, and it's like, oh my God, you go to your supervisor and you do an incident report. You tell them what happened and which patient you had used this needle on before you stuck yourself, etc., and so forth. They gather all that information, they put it together, and then they do an HIV screen on you immediately. And they'll usually use I think they're still using it this way. I'm really not as up as I should be on this right now, but they use the ELISA, which was the enzyme-linked immunosorbent assay. You can look it up, ELISA. So the ELISA is very sensitive, and you can get false positives with ELISA because it is sensitive. But if ELISA gives you a negative, that's that, as far as right now is concerned. We'll give you another test in 30 days, another one in 3 months, another one in 6 months, and then 9 months and a year. And that'll be the protocol. And if you're clean after a year, you're clean. You're good to go. Now, if ELISA says you got something, here's a problem. You just stuck yourself with that needle yesterday, and now you're seropositive today. That's not sufficient time. That's not. What that means is you already had an infection when you did the needle stick. So anyway, we'll do a backup test. It's called the Western blot, which is much more discretionary. And then the ELISA. and much more focused. And if the Western blot says you're positive for HIV, then you need to start treatment. But if you make it through that year, then everything's fine, fair dinkum. In truth, if you were infected with HIV from that needle stick, you would show positive within 90 days. But the 6 months, 9 months, and a year is just double making sure that you're okay. So the types of things that happen to you we'll have a protocol to address that. So I told my guy, if this happened 4 years ago, you're not going to get sick from what you did with that man. That's not going to make you sick. You're good. And because you're good, he's probably good too, or at least as far as you're concerned, because you didn't give him anything. You don't have anything to give him if you've had these tests, so you can stop doing that. And you give them good information like that. After all, we don't want to stop someone from masturbating because they're afraid they'll make themselves sick, right? I'm being facetious, but people have some really, really strange beliefs that we need to disabuse them of, and have some really, really not so sharp knowledge that we need to disabuse them of. Anyway. In conclusion, our efforts to educate clients in risk reduction is a best practice, in as much as we're treating the whole person and not just the illness. And if I'm going to do anything, make any kind of important decision, it's really a good idea to have as much information as I can possibly have, so that I can, make the best possible decision with all the possible outcomes considered. We're also uniquely positioned to offer these services. And that's probably the biggest thing. When we walk in and we have a guy coming in and he's, an IVDU, or you have someone coming in who's been engaged in prostitution, although politically correct terminology of that is a sexual services provider or sex worker. We can tell them how to better take care of themselves and how to better take care of their clients, or of other people, that they come in contact with. And that's not I was thinking about a woman I talked to one time who was a sexual service provider, and she was HIV positive, and she said she did not make her clients, or didn't provide her clients with condoms. If they wanted to use one, that was fine. If they didn't want to use one, that was fine too. And so I got around, there's a chance that you could be passing this illness on, to people. You could be infecting them as well. And she basically said, I don't care. If they don't want to get it, that's that's up to them. They can wear a condom if they want to. If they don't want to, I don't care. She was very cynical in that fact. In fact, you'll run across that in the movie, and the band played on when they're talking to patient zero, Gaetan Dugas. I'm not trying to be a spoiler, but he tells the doctor, he says, "Hey, doc, remember, someone gave it to me." Anyway, so that's that. Let me get on out of here and back to my other screen. I'm not sure. I think I'm pretty done with the infectious diseases unless something comes up that, I need to update you on. I do want to complete a thought that I didn't complete in that lecture, and that's that, you will be required to take some training in various subjects as you go along with your in some various areas. I mean, sexual assault and is a big thing, and learning how to deal with someone who's experienced that, who's experienced with childhood sex abuse, who have co-occurring disorders, people who have PTSD, people who have are at risk for sexually transmitted diseases and other types of diseases too. So that these current issues, special topics, whatever you want to call them, areas of focus, are both useful and necessary to someone who's working as an LCDC, because, even though our focus is on, helping people recover from alcohol and drug abuse, this is stuff that happens to them and with them. And we need to be able to deal with that as it comes up. And we need to be able to tell them where they can go for other services, etc. So, I forget what I was going to talk about next week, but I'll remember. Anyway, good night. Have a good one.